What's up, Giants fans? This is Tom, another video here today, and today's video is going to be on the very sad news that happened on Monday evening, the passing of former New York Football Giants head coach Jim Fassel at the age of 71. He was experiencing chest pains and then passed away Monday night. His son John confirmed that. His son John is the special teams coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Fassel suffered a heart attack while under sedation in a hospital near his home in Las Vegas. And Jim Fassel was a great man, both on and off the football field, highly recognized head coach. A lot of achievements across the NFL and throughout his coaching career, which I'll get into in just a moment because that's what this episode here is about today. And as a New York Giants fan, I know I started watching the Giants back when Jim Fassel was the head coach of this team around that 2002-2003 area. And Jim Fassel came in as the head coach back in 1997. The Giants were in a very gray area as a franchise. They, were struggling after Parcells left. Dan Reeves wasn't really cutting it. And Jim Fassel guided this team to 3 playoff berths in his time as the Giants head coach. He brought attitude back to the Giants. In fact, he brought the Giants to a Super Bowl. And he was named NFL Coach of the Year in his first season as a rookie head coach in the NFL. And kind of just to show you the impact that Jim Fassel brought to this franchise, I mean, he was insane. Going back to 1997, the team hit its stride. There was a quarterback change. Rookie Danny Cannell was put in, and then the Giants won the NFC East with a 10-5-1 record. That included a 7-0-1 mark against the division back when it was the old format, 5 teams in each division, back when Arizona was in our division. Only time in Giants history where they didn't lose a division game. And it was crazy because back in 97, Fassel's coming in as a rookie head coach, and the Giants were unanimously picked last in the NFC East. They were not highly praised, and they went undefeated. They had a plus 25 turnover ratio that year back in 1997. Old school Giants, won with that old school formula, very stingy with the football. The defense got turnovers. They hogged the ball. They ran it. And it's a formula that still wins games for some teams today. I know the league has changed now into more of a passing league, but Jim Fassel was an offensive guru. He inherited a team that had missed the playoffs in 5 of their previous 6 seasons under Ray Hanley and Dan Reeves, as I mentioned earlier. It was crazy. He brought back attitude. He brought back a winning tradition to the New York Football Giants. Getting that NFC East title. He had a 58-53-1 record as the head coach of the Giants, and I'll kind of show you a timeline now. Have this little graphic here that I took. So here it is, Jim Fassel in 1997. Great job, won Coach of the Year in 1997. 1998, the Giants, they were 5-8, and then they beat John Elway 13-0 Denver Broncos at Giant Stadium. They finished that year 8-8, and then 2000. We'll get into that in just a moment. But those 58 head coaching victories for Jim Fassel are the 4th highest total among all Giants head coaches in the 96-year history of the franchise. So that should not go unnoticed. And in my opinion, Jim Fassel was criminally underrated as a head coach. Everybody talks about Tom Coughlin. Everybody talks about Bill Parcells. But nobody talks about Jim Fassel. This was a very critical point in the Giants franchise because after we won those 2 Super Bowls in 86 and 90, the Giants were a losing football team. I think we made the playoffs in 93, and then Fassel came in 97. From 94 to 96, we were bad. We were really bad. That was our downtime in the 90s. It wasn't a good decade for us, and Fassel kind of brought us back to the promised land. He got us to a Super Bowl. Jim Fassel also closely focused on throwing mechanics. He was very, very good with that. And then in 2000 here, you could see the Giants went 12-4. And I'll stop sharing that now. And now this is where I want to talk about that season, the 2000 season. Jim Fassel is most well known for his infamous guarantee speech. Giants were 7-4. They had just lost 2 straight games, and I think one of them was to the Detroit Lions, who were awful that year. And late in the season, right around Thanksgiving time, Fassel, New York media is tough, and Jim Fassel was tough right back at them. He goes in and says, this team is going to the playoffs. He's shoving all his chips to the middle of the table, put a laser on his chest, you name it. And Jim Fassel knew he's probably going to lose his job if this guarantee doesn't work. But the crazy thing is, it did. He believed in his team. He believed in his players. Now, a lot of people think the Giants were an average football team roster-wise that year. I think they were well above average. Some people were like, the Giants really weren't that great of a football team. But we finished 12-4. We got the 1 seed in the NFC East, or in the NFC as a conference, and then we won the next 7 games after that speech. That includes 2 playoff games against the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings. Fassel led the Giants to the Super Bowl, and Wellington Mara took pride in the Giants being referred to as the worst team by the media to ever clinch home field advantage in the NFC playoffs. And not to mention, this was a team where Sean Payton was the offensive coordinator, Super Bowl winning head coach. John Fox was the defensive coordinator. He was coach for the Panthers, coach for the Denver Broncos. So he had 2 high-quality assistants underneath him that really did their job. Him and Peyton had some trouble chemistry-wise that year, but they got it together. So, unfortunately, the Giants lost that Super Bowl to the Baltimore Ravens, but I think what Jim Fassel did was put this franchise back where it needed to be. He restored a winning culture. In 2002, the Giants were back in the playoffs. They won their last 4, wrote it out, got a wild card spot. They were the hottest team in the NFC, in my opinion, at that time. The lowest moment of his career was that playoff game in 2002, where the Giants blew a 24-point lead in the second half to the 49ers. They were out in San Francisco in the Bay Area in a playoff game. They were up I want to say 35-13, and they lose the game. So it was the beginning of the end for Jim Fassel, because in 2003, Kerry Collins had a really bad injury, and the Giants went 4-12 that year, so reverse record to the 2000 season. And Fassel announced that he would resign with just 2 games remaining in the season because he knew he would have been fired. A similar path that Tom Coughlin took. Fassel was the head coach for 7 years, for 7 seasons, and it's a shame Fassel never got another opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL. I know he was a consultant for the Ravens, and then he became their offensive coordinator after coaching the Giants. But Jim Fassel most treasured his time with the New York Giants, not to mention he was such an important bridge to this organization. He was also the assistant coach in 91 and 92. He was a quarterback in the NFL. Now, he didn't last long in the NFL, but he was drafted by the Chicago Bears to play quarterback. And, his path to the Giants wasn't easy. He was the OC for Stanford, which Jim Fassel is the reason why John Elway is in the NFL. And, Jim Fassel's most recent coaching experience was in the United Football League, where he led the Las Vegas Locomotives to 2 championships in 2009 and 2010. I think Graham Gano might have been part of that squad, actually. And here's the message from ownership on Jim Fassel. Now that we've kind of gone through his coaching timeline, folks, on behalf of the Mara and Tisch families and our entire organization, I would like to express our condolences to the Fassel family and Jim's friends. John Mara said, "We were all saddened to hear of Jim's passing. Jim was a good man, and his record as our coach speaks for itself. Jim distinguished himself by the way he managed our team and devoted his efforts to the firefighters and other families following the tragedy of 9/11. The players respected Jim and enjoyed playing for him and his coaching staff, and we appreciated his 7 years of leading our football team." And, like I mentioned before, off the field stuff was where Jim Fassel shined as well. And I'm going to tell you guys a brief 9/11 story from Jim Fassel. his 9/11 story, and he was the head coach at the time of 9/11 for the New York Giants, and they were playing the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football the night before the terrorist attacks, and the Giants had a flight that landed in Newark very early that morning around 6 a.m., which was hours before the plane took off that landed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And what's crazy is the gate of the plane that took off, Jim Fassel was told that gate was right next to where the Giants landed. And Jim was, I believe it was an interview with Rich Eisen on the Eisen show. And Rich Eisen actually had a few words this week on Jim Fassel. So did several former players, Tiki Barber, Michael Strahan, Michael Barrow, Jesse Armstead, Kerry Collins, Jason Sehorn, you name it. But back to the story on Fassel, he had a boat in Manhattan, and he was called and asked if his boat could be used to rescue some people on 9/11. And he was mentioning this story to Jim Eisen. That was a very humbling moment. Giants Stadium was always a ground where, people would park their cars and take the bus into New York City. And Fassel had an office in New Jersey where he could look outside and see those cars parked in the parking lot by Giant Stadium. And there'd be about 200 cars there every day, rough estimate. And Fassel left work the day of 9/11. That lot was still full. And he's like, oh no. Like these people, a lot of them aren't coming back. And he arrived at work around 6 a.m. the next morning. 150 cars were still there. Those people were the ones going into the city. And Jim Fassel was very old school, very strict-minded head coach. But he told the NFL, like, look, his players can't play. Don't even bother with an injury report this week. So the NFL ended up not playing at all next week. Jim Fassel headed to Ground Zero to talk with the FDNY, to talk with the police department a couple days later. And a lot of people don't know this. He actually created a foundation called the Jim Fassel Foundation.org. And, that was the website of the foundation. And, he was just a very, very genuine man. Giants had their first game back against the Kansas City Chiefs. Jim Fassel ensured that every single member of the organization wore first responder hats. And it was a great moment. The Chiefs fans applauded the Giants when they took the field, and that never happens in Arrowhead. Very traditional stadium where their fans love their Kansas City Chiefs, but the away team got a standing ovation from the home crowd, which was very awesome. And it was even cooler that the Giants won that game. They beat the Chiefs 13-3, and there was a nice picture taken with the team after the game. And, it's just really great. That's one of my favorite moments about Jim Fassel. And I'm going to say my 3 favorite Jim Fassel moments to wrap up this show here, this episode. And I mentioned earlier the Giants beat the John Elway-led Denver Broncos back in 1998. And the Giants were 5-8 going up against the 13-0 Denver Broncos. Giants would beat the Broncos at Giant Stadium 20-16. Kent Graham threw to very familiar name, Amani Toomer, 37-yard touchdown pass with under a minute left in the game. Giants win, and then the Giants went on to win their next couple of games, finish the season out strong. My second favorite moment, again, I wasn't old enough to really, digest this in, but winning the NFC East title in 1997 was very critical for the Giants. They were out of the playoffs for the previous 3 seasons, and Jim Fassel brought that team back to the playoffs, winning an NFC East title. Watched some film, watched the interview at the end of that win. I think they were playing Washington that week, and they were able to get into the playoffs, and they had a good run, and they had a lead in that playoff game as well. And my favorite moment, the 41-0 blowout win over the Minnesota Vikings at home at Giant Stadium in the NFC Championship game. Quarterback Kerry Collins had 381 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. And this is where Jim Fassel gets the most credit. He changed people. He revitalized not Kerry Collins' career. Well, yes, his career, but his life as well. Kerry Collins came to the Giants with, somewhat of a troubled past, and Jim Fassel was able to help Kerry Collins develop as a man, as a leader of this football team, and he showed out all his potential with the Giants. Kerry Collins had his best years with the Giants. Jim Fassel had his best coaching years with the New York Football Giants. Rest in peace to Jim Fassel, and my thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to Jim's family, his friends, everybody that knew him. He seemed like a really awesome guy and a true professional who will be very missed. So that's the episode here on Jim Fassel. Really do appreciate you all tuning in. I figured I kind of wanted to go a little deep into Jim Fassel because I was a big Jim Fassel fan, one of the more underrated coaches in New York Giants history. Guys, if you like what you watch, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure to hit the like button below, ring the bell for notifications, follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well. As always, guys, thank you very much for watching. Go Big Blue.